taken me a long time to even think about writing this down. Honestly, a couple of years ago, I was pretty set in my ways, early 20s, just starting a new office job after college and trying to make a routine of things. I'd grab coffee at the same place every morning, take the bus, and generally kept to myself. Looking back, it all felt incredibly normal, and at the time it was. It's just that one little thing stuck with me, and I keep circling back to it. The coffee tasted burnt that morning. Even for Leos, I usually don't notice. I just need the caffeine. The bus was packed, as usual, and I snagged my corner seat near the back. That's where I always sit. I had the window, and my backpack wedged between my feet. Everything was normal, except I remembered distinctly leaving a small, smooth river stone on the seat next to me yesterday. A silly habit. I picked it up on a hike with my dad a few months back and just kept it. A tactile thing for stressful commutes. It wasn't there. I glanced around. Nobody sitting nearby had anything that looked like it. Probably it just fell on the floor. Someone kicked it under a seat. It wasn't a big deal. I told myself that. I really did, but I kept looking around. Then he was standing there. The guy who always wears those oversized headphones, even when he's not listening to anything. He'd been on the bus a couple of times the past week, always in the periphery of my vision. He wasn't looking at me, just near me. He stopped right in front of my seat, and he smiled. A slow, deliberate smile, not a friendly one. He held up my keychain, the little wooden wolf my sister carved for my graduation. I hadn't even realized it was missing. It was attached to my backpack zipper. It wasn't there a minute ago. My hands went cold. I just stared. I think I actually stopped breathing. He said something. I couldn't hear it over the engine and the music leaking from someone else's earbuds. But he wasn't looking at my face. He was looking at the backpack, at the zipper where the keychain had been. He shook his head slightly, still smiling, and walked towards the front of the bus. I fumbled with my bag, yanking it off the floor and clutching it to my chest like I was trying to protect something inside. He must be a collector. A weirdo who picks pockets, maybe. It explained the stone, too. He probably knocked it off while trying to snag something. It still didn't explain the smile. I didn't sleep well. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile. And the headphones. It sounds stupid, but it was the headphones that really got to me. Like he was blocking something out. Not listening to something. The next morning, I took the earlier bus. I figured if I was farther up front, I'd have a better view of who got on. I'd see him coming. It didn't work. He was already on the bus 2 rows back reading, headphones on. Naturally, he didn't look up. He didn't even glance my way, which was worse. Like he knew I'd be looking. At work, I started going through my things, just checking. It was ridiculous. I know my lunch bag, my coat pocket, even the little compartment in my desk where I keep pens. Everything was there, but I kept thinking about the keychain, the stone, things that weren't valuable, just mine. Then I noticed it. A small clay bird. It was on my desk, tucked between the stapler and the phone. I didn't own a clay bird. I've never even liked clay birds. It was detailed, though, almost unsettlingly so. Like someone had really spent time on it. Brown and gray, with tiny painted eyes. My grandmother used to make pottery. She gave them to everyone, and she passed away last year. I hadn't seen this one since the funeral. I remember specifically packing up the remaining pieces, deciding which family members got what. This wasn't one of them. It was one I'd set aside, thinking I'd find a place for it later. A place I clearly hadn't. Someone had been in my apartment. That's the only explanation. A break-in maybe, but nothing else was missing. It felt targeted, like they weren't after anything of value, just something to me. I called the building manager, told him I thought someone might have used a key. He said they hadn't had any reports of anything, but he'd send someone to check the locks. It didn't feel like locks were the problem. The locks seemed fine, the manager said. Nothing forced. No sign of tampering. It felt wrong, though, like he wasn't really looking. He just wanted me to stop bothering him. I spent the rest of the day on edge, jumping at every notification, every creak of the building. I kept glancing at the door, imagining someone watching from the hallway. I decided to work late, hoping to feel safer with more people around. Stupid, I know, but I needed to get some files finished. It was almost 11 when I realized I was the last one on the floor. Everyone else had left hours before. That's when I heard it. A soft click from the kitchenette. Not a light switch, more like a cabinet door. I froze, probably just the cleaning crew. I told myself, they must have a late shift tonight, but the cleaning crew doesn't come on Fridays, and the click was followed by a rustling, like someone was moving things around. I slowly, carefully stood up and walked towards the kitchenette. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my ears. As I rounded the corner, I saw it. A shadow, fleeting, moving across the back wall. It wasn't a person, not exactly. It was smaller, lower to the ground, and the shadow wasn't cast by something, it was part of something. Then, a ceramic mug clattered to the floor and shattered. I didn't even register the sound fully before I turned and ran. I didn't head for the door. I went into the supply closet, locked it, jammed a chair under the handle. I sat there, shaking, listening. Nothing, just silence. After what felt like forever, I peeked out. The kitchenette was empty. The broken mug lay in shards on the floor, and on the counter, neatly arranged, were my pens. All of them, sorted by color. I don't sort my pens. I never have. It was like someone was tidying up. Maybe it was a prank? A really messed up, elaborate prank from someone at work? It had to be. It just had to be. The police came, of course, 2 officers, young, mostly just wanting to fill out reports. They dusted for prints and found nothing useful. They asked about forced entry and about valuables. I kept pointing to the pens, the way things were arranged. They exchanged glances. One of them suggested I might be stressed, overworked. I almost laughed. Building management sent a maintenance guy, old Mr. Henderson, who'd been there since the building went up. He checked the locks, the windows, and the ventilation shafts. He kept muttering about settling and old buildings. He found something, though, a small scrape on the inside of the window frame in the bedroom. Barely noticeable, like someone had tried to pry it open, then given up. He said it was old, covered in dust, and probably happened years ago. But it wasn't the wood itself that bothered me. It was the tiny flecks of blue paint embedded in the scrape. The exact shade of blue as the trim in my grandmother's old house. The house I hadn't thought about in years. The house where that ceramic mug came from. I tried to change the locks myself that night. I'd watched a YouTube video and figured it couldn't be that hard. It was. I stripped the screws, cross-threaded a bolt, and ended up with a useless pile of metal and a door that wouldn't latch. I just sat on the floor, leaning against the door, feeling stupid and exposed. I started thinking about David from accounting. He'd always been overly friendly, asking about my weekend plans, remembering details I barely recalled mentioning. Maybe he was just a lonely guy, trying to connect. Maybe he'd been coming in while I was at work, just looking around. It felt ridiculous, but it was the only thing that made any kind of sense. A pathetic, creepy sense, but sense nonetheless. Then I remembered he'd asked me about my grandmother last week. He said he remembered meeting her at a company picnic years ago. I hadn't even known she went to those. I called in sick the next day. I said I had a migraine. Honestly, it wasn't a lie. It felt like someone had been meticulously cataloging my life, and the thought of facing David, of making polite small talk, made my skin crawl. I spent the day staring at the shadows in my apartment, trying to convince myself it was stress, that the blue paint was a coincidence, that David was just enthusiastic. I rearranged the furniture, not a lot, just enough to make things feel different. I even moved the ceramic mug to a higher shelf, out of sight. It seemed stupid, childish almost, but it felt like taking control of something. I started triple-checking the locks, even though Mr. Henderson had assured me they were fine. I'd walk through the apartment, flicking switches, just to make sure everything was where I left it. It has been years. I still check the locks every single time. But it's not the apartment I worry about anymore. It's anywhere. Hotels, Airbnbs, even campsites. The first thing I do when I walk into a new place is check the windows. Not for burglars, not really. I check for scratches, for paint flecks, for any sign that someone might have been there before. Quietly observing. I stopped taking the bus a long time ago too. It always felt too exposed. I figured David had figured out my route, was just following me. It sounds insane when I say it out loud, but at the time it made some sort of twisted sense. A weird, unsettling way to rationalize the feeling of being watched. I've been driving for almost 10 years now. It's funny, isn't it? How easily you can rewrite your life around a ghost, or what you think is a ghost. It all feels so distant now, like a half-remembered dream, but the habit remains. I still check the windows, always. It feels strange even typing this out. Honestly, it was almost a year ago now. I was living in a city a few hours from my family, working a pretty standard office job and trying to get my bearings as a newly independent 20-something. The apartment was okay, nothing special, and sharing with someone kept the rent manageable. At the time, it all felt incredibly normal, just life happening, and it's been something I've thought about more and more lately. The coffee tasted burnt that morning, which was weird. I usually measure carefully, but I was running late, already mentally composing an email apologizing for being 5 minutes behind. I was at the window, waiting for the bus, scrolling through news headlines, mostly just bad as usual when I saw him again. Our neighbor, the guy on the third floor. He was adjusting things on his windowsill. Not plants or anything normal, just a collection of small, smooth stones. He would pick one up, turn it over in his hand, then place it just so, then another. It wasn't a chaotic arrangement, not exactly. More like a precise, repetitive pattern, each stone facing inwards towards us. I ducked back. It felt wrong. Like he'd caught me watching. I told myself he was just a bit of a hobbyist, maybe a rock collector. People have weird hobbies, but the way he was facing, the deliberate placement, it wasn't about enjoying the view. It was about arranging things for someone inside his apartment to see. I hurried out, practically ran to the bus stop. The whole walk, I kept glancing back. His window was dark, but I could still picture those stones. I figured he must be retired, maybe a little lonely, filling his time. It was sad, honestly. That evening, I noticed something else. A book. Mine. A first edition I'd been meaning to reread, left open on the kitchen counter. I distinctly remember putting it back on the shelf. I just assumed I'd been more tired than I thought, absent-minded. It happens. I put it away again, a little annoyed with myself, but the image of those stones kept flickering behind my eyes. I started double-checking things, keys, wallet, phone, the usual, but then it became everything. The thermostat, the locks. I even started taking pictures of how I left things, just to be sure. It felt ridiculous, paranoid, but that book and the stones wouldn't leave my head. The next thing was my coffee. I make it the same way every morning, automatically 2 sugars, but one morning there were 3, just 3. I figured I'd been extra tired, clumsy, and added an extra without thinking. Then I noticed the sugar bowl was almost empty. I always refill it. I always do. I started taking the stairs instead of the elevator. It was stupid. I know. But the elevator felt contained, like a box where someone could just be. I'd catch my reflection in the polished doors and jump. The man on the 3rd floor wasn't a factor in this, not directly. He was just part of the feeling, a symbol of something off. Then I found the photos. Not of me exactly, but of my things. My books arranged on the shelf, my shoes by the door, all taken from a low angle, like someone was sitting on the floor. A lot of them, dozens, saved on a flash drive I found tucked inside a kitchen cabinet behind the spice rack. It wasn't random. They were cataloged with dates, times, and little notes. Leather boots, brown laces, first edition, spines slightly faded. It was meticulous, I thought. For a second, maybe he was a detective, some kind of evidence collector. Maybe he was working a cold case, and my apartment looked like a scene from it. It was a terrible thought, but it felt less terrifying than the alternative. I rechecked the locks, every single one. Twice. It felt ritualistic, like if I just went through the motions enough times, it would become true. Secure, but it didn't. The feeling stayed, that prickling on the back of my neck. I started leaving a chair scraped slightly out from the table, a pen on the counter, just to see if things would be moved. And they were always subtle shifts, not enough to be accidental. I had a work call scheduled for 9. I was prepping, going over notes when I heard it. A floorboard creaked. Upstairs, my apartment is on the second floor. The man on the third floor as well. He's elderly, and I hadn't heard him moving around all day. It wasn't a loud creak, but distinct, like someone testing a spot, shifting their weight. I froze, holding my breath, listening. Then, a shadow, just a flicker at the edge of my peripheral vision, in the hallway, by the doorway to the bedroom. I whipped my head around. Nothing. I told myself it was the light playing tricks. The building settles, old pipes, anything, but my phone buzzed with a meeting reminder, and as I glanced down, I saw it. A hand, just the back of a hand, pale and veined, reaching around the doorframe, adjusting the small framed print I'd hung there last week. It was moving the picture a fraction of an inch to the left. I didn't scream, didn't move, I just stared. My heart hammering so hard, I thought it would break my ribs. It was there for maybe 3 seconds. Then it was gone. I bolted the door, grabbed my keys, and was out in the hallway before I even registered what I was doing. Down the stairs, 2 at a time. I didn't stop running until I was halfway to the grocery store, 3 blocks away. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my car. I think he's been pretending to be a harmless old man all along, gaining my trust so he could, I don't know, watch me, collect things. I called the police, of course. It felt stupid, even as I was dialing. "Someone's been in my apartment," I said, trying to sound calm. The dispatcher asked a lot of questions. Did I see signs of forced entry? No. Was anything missing? Not that I could tell. Had I left a window open? No. They sent a patrol car, 2 officers, young and mostly polite. They walked through, looking at the adjusted picture frame and the books slightly out of order on the shelf. They dusted for prints, mostly mine. One of them, a woman with tired eyes, asked about Mr. Henderson. "He seems like a nice enough old man," I said, then immediately felt sick remembering. Nice? He was the one I backtracked. He's just quiet, keeps to himself. They talked to him, and I heard snippets through the thin walls. Something about checking on me, being a concerned neighbor. He'd apparently offered to water my plants when I mentioned going out of town next month. They didn't find anything conclusive. A few smudged prints that weren't mine, but nothing they could tie to anyone. The officer with tired eyes suggested I get a security system. She handed me a card. I thanked them, feeling utterly ridiculous. The whole thing felt manufactured, like I'd imagined it. I went back inside, determined to fix things. I bought new locks, deadbolts for both the door and the windows. I spent the afternoon rearranging everything, putting things exactly where I wanted them. I even moved the bookshelf just to prove to myself I could control the space. I took pictures of everything, a before snapshot to prove what was mine. When I went to bed, I set up a camera, an old webcam, pointed right at the door. I figured if he came back, I'd have proof. I thought it would make me feel safe enough to sleep. That's what I told myself anyway. That it was just a lonely old man, confused, maybe slipping. But this morning the camera was gone. Just gone. And the bookshelf, it was back in its original place. It wasn't about the camera. Not really. It wasn't about the bookshelf either. It was just the knowing, the absolute undeniable feeling that someone had been inside, touched my things, while I was somewhere else. I called the police again, but what could I even say? Someone's moving my furniture and stealing my cheap webcams. They'd think I was losing it. I didn't bother. I spent the next week mostly at work, leaving the apartment at dawn and coming back late. I even started eating lunch in the park, just to avoid being there, surrounded by those walls. I kept picturing him, Mr. Henderson, fiddling with things. It wasn't malicious, I started to think. Just lonely. Desperate for connection. Maybe he had a key, a spare from a previous tenant he never returned. Maybe he just let himself in, wanting to feel less alone, and the moving things was a way to leave his mark, to prove he'd been there. It sounded ridiculous even as I thought it, but it was easier than the alternative, than admitting someone might be deliberately violating me. I moved again, eventually, not because I was scared, although I was, but because I couldn't stand being there. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of things shifting when I wasn't looking, and now, always, I checked the vents. Every hotel room, every rental, every campsite with a cabin, I check the vents. I pull the covers back, look up into the dark spaces just to make sure nothing's been tampered with. It's a stupid habit, I know. You wouldn't think to look. It's been nearly 10 years, and I still do it. And I still wonder how long it was happening before I noticed. It's taken me a long time to even think about writing this down. Honestly, probably a couple of years. Back then, I was pretty content, mid-20s, working a desk job I didn't hate and trying to get into a regular workout routine at the local gym. It was all very normal, and I fell into a comfortable rhythm with everything. Looking back, it's strange how easily routines can make you feel invisible and how something small can stick with you for so long. I kept going to work, trying to shake it off. It was hard, though. Every time I caught my reflection in a window, I was aware of being looked at, even when I was alone. It wasn't a feeling exactly, more like a pressure behind my eyes. I started taking the long way around the office, avoiding certain hallways. Stupid, I know. Then I started seeing her. Not at the gym, not at first. It was at the coffee shop near my apartment. She was standing in line wearing a sweater almost exactly like mine, same color, same chunky knit. I just looked. She turned and it hit me like a wave. It wasn't the sweater, it was her face. It was my face. Not identical, but close, uncomfortably close, like looking at a slightly distorted photograph. She had the same freckle above her left eyebrow, the same little dent in her chin. She caught my stare and smiled, a quick, polite thing. I looked away, suddenly needing air. I thought maybe it was someone from work, a new hire I hadn't met, but she didn't look like she belonged in an office. More artistic, maybe. She had a sketchbook under her arm. I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence, a bizarre, unsettling coincidence. People look alike all the time. A few days later, I saw her again, outside my building. She was talking on the phone, laughing, and she was carrying groceries. The same groceries I'd ordered online for delivery that afternoon. My stomach twisted. It had to be a mistake. The delivery person must have gotten the order mixed up. It was just bad luck. But even as I told myself that, I knew it didn't feel like luck. It felt deliberate. I started taking the long way to work. 3 blocks further, all surface streets. It added 15 minutes, but it meant I avoided the coffee shop on Elm. That's where I'd seen her most often, always sketching in that little notebook. It felt exposed being there, like she was waiting for me. Stupid, I know. It's just a coffee shop. Then I started noticing her at other places. Not waiting, exactly. Just there. Across the street from my gym, browsing the bookstore I went to on Saturdays. Once, I swear, I saw her walking my dog. I don't even have a dog. It was a Tuesday and I was coming home from work, rushing to beat the dinner crowd at the grocery store. I was already late, stressed about a report due the next day. I unlocked my apartment door and the smell hit me first. Cinnamon. I hadn't baked anything. And then I saw her in my kitchen. She was stirring something on the stove with her back to me. She turned, and it was her. The same freckle, the same dent. She smiled, that same polite, quick smile. "Oh, hi," she said, like she was expecting me. "I thought you'd be later. I made apple pie. I remembered you mentioning how much you like it." I just stood there, frozen. I hadn't told anyone I liked apple pie. Not recently. Not anyone I'd spoken to in weeks. It's a nice surprise," I managed to say, my voice sounding thin and reedy. She gestured to the table. "I set a place for you. I figured, since we're neighbors, we should get to know each other." Neighbors? She didn't live in this building. I'd know. I knew everyone in my building. Or I thought I did. Maybe she'd just moved in. Maybe I'd been so preoccupied with work, I hadn't noticed new faces. It explained the groceries, the sightings. She was just being friendly, trying to be neighborly. But why the pie? Why know about the pie? I sat down. I couldn't think of a polite way to refuse. The pie was warm. Apple cinnamon, exactly how I like it. I took a bite, forcing myself to. It tasted good, too good. Like someone had been watching me eat pie for years, studying the perfect ratio of spice to fruit. She watched me eat, a small smile playing on her lips. "So," she said, after I'd swallowed, "how was your meeting with Mr. Henderson?" I nearly choked. That meeting was confidential. I hadn't told anyone about it, not even Sarah. It was about the restructuring, potential layoffs, a mess. "How did you know about that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Her smile widened. "Oh, I hear things. Building buzz, people talk. That sounded plausible, but it didn't feel plausible. It felt calculated, like she'd anticipated my question." Then the phone rang. My landline. I rarely get calls on that thing. I answered it. It was Sarah. "Honey, are you home? I forgot my presentation notes. The big ones. I need them for tomorrow." "I'm here," I said, glancing at the woman across the table. "But there's someone here with me." "Who?" "Oh, did you finally meet Mrs. Gable from apartment 3B? She's a sweetheart." Mrs. Gable? That's her name. That's what she told me her name was, but Sarah's never mentioned a Mrs. Gable, and more importantly, Sarah knows I'm stressed about work. She knows I wouldn't have a random neighbor over while facing potential layoffs. "Sarah, listen," I began, but the woman across from me reached out and rested her hand on mine. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Everything's fine, dear," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Just a friendly visit." Then the oven timer beeped. She didn't move her hand. She didn't even blink. She just smiled. And I realized with a sickening lurch that this wasn't about being neighborly. It was about control. She was trying to isolate me, to insert herself into my life, to replace me. I yanked my hand away and bolted for the door. She didn't try to stop me physically. She just watched. As I fumbled with the lock, I glanced back. She was standing in the kitchen, perfectly still, holding a carving knife, the one I use for Thanksgiving. It glinted under the fluorescent light. I didn't wait to see what she'd do. I wrenched the door open and ran. I didn't stop running until I was halfway down the block. I looked back. The apartment window was dark, empty. But on my doorstep, I saw it, a small, perfectly formed apple pie sitting in the cold night air. I called the police, of course, after the pie. It felt stupid even saying it. Someone left a pie on my doorstep. But I told them about the woman, about how she'd been watching me, about the knife. They sent a patrol car. A young officer barely out of the academy took a report. He kept glancing around my apartment like he was looking for something specific, something I hadn't noticed. He asked if I'd had any disputes with anyone, any exes, anything. I told him no. Not really. Just this. He said they'd increase patrols in the area. That was it. It felt dismissive, like I was bothering him. I started going through everything. My bills, my mail, anything that might explain it. Then I found the lease agreement for the apartment. It was odd, a lot of clauses I hadn't remembered seeing before, and a signature on the application that wasn't mine, a woman's signature. Familiar. I pulled up the building's online directory. The previous tenant for my unit. Her name was Eleanor Vance, and there was a picture. It wasn't just familiar, it was me, or a version of me. Same eyes, same hair, the same little mole on her chin, but older, worn down. I went back to the police, showed them the picture. The same officer. This time he was openly annoyed. He said it was a coincidence. People look alike all the time. He suggested I was stressed, that I needed to relax. I tried to explain about the pie, the woman, the feeling of being watched, replaced. He just kept repeating that there was no evidence of a crime. I started sleeping with a chair wedged under the doorknob. Every creak, every shadow. I jumped. I thought, maybe she's trying to scare me out. Maybe she wants the apartment. That made sense. It had to. But even thinking it, I knew it wasn't that simple. It couldn't be. It's quiet now, really quiet. I moved, obviously not far, just across town. A different building, different everything. I still check the online directories for previous tenants, though. It's automatic, a reflex. I even started doing it for grocery stores, for doctor's offices, anywhere I'm a new face. It feels ridiculous, but I can't stop. I haven't seen her. Not a glimpse. After a while, the police stopped pretending to care. They figured I'd moved on, or maybe finally snapped and sought help. I didn't. I just left. I used to be impulsive. I would say yes to things, go to parties, meet people. Now I need to know everything first. Background checks, mutual friends, their social media, everything. It sounds awful. I know, like I'm a detective in my own life, but it feels necessary. Someone had gone to a lot of trouble. Someone knew things about me, about my life, that they shouldn't have. I think it was about control, about building a life for her, using my blueprints, a twisted sort of identity theft, but not for money or credit, for existence. It's the only thing that makes sense. She wanted to be me, and she was methodical about it. I avoid open houses now, entirely. The idea of walking into a space already steeped in someone else's history, not knowing who lived there, what they were like, is too much. I stick to new construction or places where the previous owners are clearly moving far away. It's limited my options, definitely. Dating's a nightmare, but it's worth it. Every single awkward silence, every missed connection. It's worth the peace of mind. It's been almost 5 years, and I still Google my own name just to see what comes up. Old habits, I guess, and a lingering feeling that things aren't quite as settled as they seem.